This evening we are going to spend what I'm assuming is going to be a significant amount of time talking about our preliminary plans for school reopening. And to all of our family and staff and friends and everybody at home that is tuning in, I really want to underscore a couple things with this discussion this evening. I think the first part is it is meant to be just that. It is a discussion. We are in a really interesting situation. First time our generation has faced anything like this, although other pandemics have certainly occurred before this. But it's new to us. And so we're learning as much as we can and staying on top of all the research. We are trying to learn best practice. When we had to move into this situation in the spring, around mid-March, we had to do so very quickly, without a lot of notice. And, certainly very much want to say thank you to the staff for, pivoting is a new term term people are using a lot lately. I shouldn't say it's a new term, but for making that shift in the way we deliver our instruction and supporting our students and families. But with that, we know that we can do things different. And we know that, again, there are practices we should continue with, practices that we may want to abandon, and new practices that we should start as we venture into this next phase of teaching and learning during this pandemic. And so this evening, I'm going to actually share my screen, but we are going to spend a good chunk of time talking a bit about what our initial thinking is. And so that's the second part that I really want to underscore. These plans for this evening are preliminary. And essentially at this stage, and I'll review the timeline in a moment, we are just processing out what our initial thinking and ideas are around how to get our schools reopened in the fall as safely as possible. With that, I would like to start by just reminding our school community about our guideposts. And these are the actual tenets of our work. And I'm glad Matt said what he did regarding our focus as we move forward through the pandemic in this next phase of teaching and learning, because the work isn't stopping. I spent some time at our last meeting when I was going over my evaluation evidence and reflection documents, talking a bit about how, when mid-March kind of struck, the question didn't just become, how do we do remote learning? The question became, how do we continue to meet the purpose that we've set out in our school district, in that trying to develop those happy, healthy, proficient students ready for college, career, and community. And we got some things, I think, right, and we got some things wrong, and I think we got some stuff in between. And so what we're looking to do as we move into this next phase is to continue to use our purpose as the driver, to use our district strategy, staying focused on the what, the how, the whole child in the community. One of the things the school committee had a chance to see as far as evidence was the work we are still doing with our literacy curriculum. We're adopting a new curriculum. The pandemic's not stopping that. Kids have to read. And that is our work. And so we are staying very much anchored and focused in driving forward our improvement work with our instructional practice, with our curriculum, addressing the needs of the whole child, and still trying to partner very closely with our community through all of this. Frankly, this next phase of work is not something the school system can do alone. And we're going to talk a bit about our community involvement and community partnerships as we walk through the reopening plans. And then specifically when we started, the leadership team, when we started thinking about how do we do this work? How do we do this remotely? How do we meet with teachers? How do we support kids? How do we connect with families? How do we feed families and children? And how do we do all of this? Before we got to a lot of the answers to those questions, we started by developing these principles. these three guiding principles. And I know, I won't read them to folks. I know that we've seen them at nauseum, and they've been in emails and school committee meetings, but I just want to put them out again because these three main areas, these guideposts, are still guiding us through this decision-making process and through the work. With that, we have two goals. We have two main goals for reopening our schools. The first goal is really anchored in this idea of physical, behavioral, intellectual health. And that really goes back to looking at the whole child. Yes, we're an academic institution. We're about teaching and learning, and we embrace that. But we also know that there are other components to our students and our staff, for that matter, that are really important. And so these areas are very much shaping the way we think about reopening our schools and the intentional decision-making that goes into that and how we move forward with that. The second goal, speaking both as an educator and also as a dad, this is a really important one. And that's, we need to get our kids back into our classrooms as safely as possible. And I want to underscore focusing on everyone's safety, all of us. And so, we'll speak a little bit this evening about how we do that, and how we take a very slow kind of approach, a very intentional approach to reopening schools. I want to say, again, up front, these are just preliminary thoughts and ideas right now. And there's still quite a bit of work to do that we'll talk about at the end of our discussion that needs to happen in order to execute on this work and shift certain areas if possible, if we need to. So for our families watching at home, I would like to make sure that, and I'll say this again at the end, that our families know that we're going to have a Facebook Live on Monday at 5 p.m. And I'll be sending out this presentation and this particular part of the video of our school committee meeting tomorrow with a survey. So parents, please know that we are reaching out to you for feedback, for input, and to our staff. We have a really strong staff in BMR, and I had the pleasure of meeting with about 100 of them today on Zoom, talking about some of these things. We have another meeting on Monday, and a survey also will be going out to staff with the same presentation and the video link to get staff feedback. So when I say this is a community effort, it's a community effort. This is going to be a Herculean effort that's going to require everybody's positivity, everybody's productive kind of energy and effort to get this work off the ground. But again, we need to keep in mind focusing on the physical, intellectual, and behavioral health while getting as many students safely back into the classroom as we can. So before we launch into some of the specifics of the plans, I just want to share some data. I thought this would be really important for everybody to see. This data comes directly from both boards of health. We speak with them on a routine basis. As a matter of fact, Ms. Aaronworth had a call with them today. And since March in Blackstone, this was as of July 18th, we've had 59 COVID-19 cases out of a total population of last census, 9,326. So it's about a 0.6% infection rate. For Millville, we've had a total of 30 COVID cases since March. And again, that's of July 18th. That is a 0.9% infection rate. So collectively, we're hovering as a regional system, we're hovering around 0.8% as far as the infection rate goes. I put this out there because, like I'm assuming many of you watching and on school committee, I'm a news junkie, and I'm constantly reading a variety of news sources, like many, and they tend to focus on the hotspots. So you hear about the Texas and Arizona and Florida, and in the spring it was in the Northeast, New York City, et cetera. And so I do think local context matters. I think it's important. So I wanted to make sure to be able to put that data out for folks who maybe haven't had a chance to see it. This work hasn't just begun in the past couple of weeks. We've had a really quite the journey so far to our reopening planning. And you can see, I won't certainly read through all these items to everybody at home, but we have a significant number of staff, school committee, family members involved in our return and recovery teams. We started this work in May, believe it or not, before last school year had even ended, and started talking about what are the things that we need to be thinking about? What are the considerations we need to make? What are the different ideas we have around getting students safely back into school? How do we support our students, our families, and our teachers better that are trying to do this work? We then organized a much larger group into 4 subgroups, and there's a couple of kind of offshoots, if you will, of that particular subgroup listed here. And those groups have been working really hard to put together plans for teaching and learning. And I don't mean the structure of what does a hybrid look like, what does remote look like, but they've been really focused on what's the work that's happening inside of that structure. So we took to our families, we took your feedback and we sent it to the working groups. And we pulled it apart. We found patterns and trends and said, how do we use this to inform what we do next? And we saw some really important themes surface. Like, we need to do better with our feedback. We need to give parents more feedback on how students are learning. Where are their gaps? We talked a bit about assessment. You know, when the kids return, how do we actually assess where they are? We've got a summer remote learning program going. For almost 100 students across the system. How do we work to help mitigate the learning loss for those kids? And how do we then take those prerequisite skills, concepts, standards that they need to know before launching into the next school year and make sure that they've got that information, right? So they're ready to launch. So I just want to give a big shout out to our teaching and learning team, to all of our teams, but we really took this feedback to try to unpack it and make some very clear determinations on whatever structure, whatever learning models in place, what's the work that needs to happen within that existing model. And then you can see just a variety of meetings from our leadership team that I am very lucky to be at the helm of. We have an incredibly strong district leadership team across our system with principals, assistant principals. We have coaches on the team, technology folks. And so we're really happy and pleased with that. And they've added a tremendous amount to the work. Many calls with the Commissioner of Education. As you can imagine, there's new information coming out. In some cases, it feels like almost daily. Trying to keep up with all the guidance is quite a bit, but very important. Meetings with our teachers union and really sitting down on the table and saying, how do we make this work? How do we try to reopen schools and keep everybody healthy and care for our children and our staff in the best way we can, our boards of health. And I will say, I think one of the things that has been really, it's interesting. We had a meeting with teachers today. One of the teachers commented on some of these slides looking like slides she had seen in another system. And I kind of smiled and I said, yeah, thinking as I'm looking at that feedback, we're all working together. We're one region, right? So Blackstone Valley, other than Milford, you've got quite a few small systems, all hovering around that 1,500, give or take. And sure, you can bet we're going to be sharing resources and documents and ideas and plans. We're all in the same zone. We're all working together, and we're trying really hard to our families who are worried because they live in Blackstone, but they might teach in a surrounding community. What I can tell you is that our plans probably won't be perfectly aligned, because again, context does matter, and each community is slightly different, but we sure are trying where we can to make some alignment there. And then keeping up with research has been critical. So the department has required us to come up with these 3 plans. And I know that isn't news to anybody. You've got to have a full in-person learning model option to submit to the department. You've got to have a hybrid option to submit, and then finally remote learning. I think one of the things that is somewhat unique about our approach in BMR, and we are truly a district of one, trying to move forward, keeping our blueprint and our students at the core of our work, but we're adapting. And we know that depending upon the age and stage of our students, the needs might be different. So what we will share this evening is not one plan for every kid, for every student, because every student has different needs, right? So, we see the importance of adapting that work as we move forward as a true district of one, with that goal of bringing kids back safely and staff back safely. And then the last piece of data to share, and I'm sure some of the parents are probably thinking, come on, Jason, get to the plan, please. But I just want to share with everybody, the results from our survey in the spring. So when we talked about those models, right, we talked about these 3 plans, and we asked families, if we had a hybrid, and at the time we were thinking if it was a week on, week off, where would you fall on that? Where would your interest be? So we had 550 unique surveys, and here are the results. You can see that at the high school, 77% of families said they would opt for a hybrid model. Now we're interpreting that as some in-person, right? We didn't list a full in-person as an option there. Our sense was if they would opt for a hybrid, they'd probably opt for an in-person. But please know that we'll be resurveying everybody tomorrow. And then, of course, you can see to the right, that last column, our remote model. And what do the percents look like in terms of that level of comfort for folks who might want to keep their children at home in a remote model. One thing I want to underscore with this, remote model is not homeschooling. So families, if you're tuning in tonight and you're thinking, I'm just going to homeschool my kid, that's not remote. That's actually something really different that you've got to apply for, fill out an application, review your curriculum, your schedule, and send everything in for me to review for approval. So I just want to make sure that people at home understand the difference between remote and homeschooling, because there is a significant difference in those 2 models. And we'll talk about specifically the remote model in a few minutes. We then surveyed staff and said, to what degree are you comfortable with these 3 options? And here's how the staff felt. Now, this was in June. And so, we're going to resurvey the faculty, and we're going to be asking some different questions in this particular survey than we did the first time, but still very, very important to get a sense where the staff are currently. But you can see in June, out of about 300 staff members, we had 195 take it, so it was about a 50%, over 50%, about 2/3 of a sample size. And you can see that at the time, 88% of our staff in June were comfortable with some type of in-person, right? Whether it was a hybrid or small, in-person small groups, that kind of thing. And again, we'll be resurveying the faculty again, just like the parents, to get a sense. To everyone at home that's listening, I think this part's really important. These surveys were anonymous that we did in June. The surveys that we're going to be sending to families and staff tomorrow cannot be anonymous because we need the specific information on staff and students so that we actually can start the planning work. And so you'll have a better sense of why that's so important when you open the survey. But families, we're going to ask very specific questions and feedback on our plans. If you would opt your child into a particular model, do you need transportation? And so they can't be anonymous. We have to collect all of that feedback. And I will say, if there are parents or families or staff who are not comfortable taking the survey, we're going to have to reach out to you personally, because we need to know so that we can help support you and we can help support our planning and moving the district forward. So I just wanted to put that piece out to everybody. So another round of surveys will be coming tomorrow, and there will be a very hard stop to the surveys. That will be Wednesday, August 5th. That is because on Thursday, August 6th, we will be bringing recommendations forward I will be bringing recommendations forward to the school committee, final recommendations, and I want to make sure that I have your voice captured in those recommendations and your feedback. So I cannot underscore the importance of the survey piece of this. So now to some preliminary thinking around our plans. So our in-person, this is just a 30,000 foot view up. Please know that we are working on a final reopening document that will be released at some point next week or early the following week. We have to submit these preliminary plans to the Department of Education tomorrow, and then our final proposals to the Department of Education on August 10th. And so we will be releasing our final reopening plans right around that time. And what I will tell you is that in addition to the plans, we will have the research the documentation, all the information that has been collected that are helping us drive the development of what we will put forward as a final plan for a school committee to review and make a decision on. And so with our in-person, again, at a 30,000-foot view up, so to speak, you can see that we need to consider alternative spaces. We have to reduce class size, keeping in mind a 6-foot distancing. I think that's important. Mr. Aaronworth will talk about in a few minutes this notion of 3 feet of social distancing versus 6 feet, and he'll get into all the specifics there. But keeping in mind the 6 feet distancing and what does that look like to our actual facility spaces, desks, how many kids can safely be in a classroom with a 6-foot distancing, looking at reducing the idea of mixing student groups right at the secondary level, 6 through 12, that happens a lot. And so we have to look at minimizing that, particularly at the high school, and working to limit transitions, in and out of multiple classrooms. And lastly, how do we construct building cohorts of kids, so groups of kids that don't interface with lots of other students. I will tell you, in this space, the in-person space, and in the hybrid space, we are also looking at alternative learning spaces, like being outside. Mr. Aaronworth can speak to it later, but we are actually going to be securing some tents so we can hold some outdoor classrooms. Kids and teachers can eat outside for lunch. And again, just to give that open, fresh air and clean space for everybody, as safety is obviously our top priority. So this is just kind of a high view of what our in-person, full in-person learning would look like. And so here's our preliminary thinking as we kind of start to work through in-person into remote. We are proposing in our preliminary thinking, and there's a lot of detail to work out, but that all kindergarten through 3rd graders and our special populations, which I'll have Ms. Pilla Galarani speak to in a moment, return full-time to our schools in the fall. That's a full 5 days a week. The challenge here is staffing in space. And so, again, going with this notion of keeping children 6 feet apart, our youngest children 6 feet apart, we know that we can't do that in one classroom and have a whole class there, right? There's too many students. You can't socially distance them correctly. And so we looked at the latest research and really have determined, based on a study that was done in South Korea of about 6,500 students, that children under 10 are not showing to spread the virus as those that are 10 and older. What the research in that particular study has shown is that children 10 and older spread the virus like an adult could spread it. And so for us, we are looking at a K-3 continuum, which is our 5 to 8-year-olds, to be back in our buildings full-time because they are not, according to our latest research, spreading the virus as older students are. So you'll see a different model for our 4th graders and up. But in this particular model, we are also looking at really needing to close any literacy gap that has been developed in our students since the beginning of this pandemic. For our families listening at home with our youngest learners, you probably know just how real the struggle is, particularly when it comes to literacy. It is very hard to teach a child how to read through Zoom or through a Google Hangout. The level of, we call it phonics and phonemic awareness, but sounding out letters and putting letters together into blends and then those chunks of letters of blends into words and words into sentences, etc. It's not impossible, but it certainly is very challenging to do in this capacity. And so we have made a decision, preliminarily speaking, that K-3, we would like to be able to return all of those students. Again, we have the research behind it, and then we have the actual instructional data behind it too. We need to be able to do that. And that's not going to come without exercising some significant flexibility. And I want to preface this next piece with the notion that this portion of our plan, we know, may be challenging for some and worrisome for some, and I get that. But to be very frank, we do not have the space at the complex to make sure that every K through third grade teacher has 2 classroom spaces adjoining in order to spread the students out. The room that we have at the elementary level, as I'm sure will come no surprise to folks, it's at Millville. Millville was built for 600 students. There's about 200 students there, a little over that when you count our pre-K. That's district-wide, by the way. And so what we are preliminarily proposing, and I'll share in a moment with parents how we're looking to collect your feedback on this, is that we move all kindergarten in first grade to Millville Elementary for next year. And we move all second, third, fourth, and fifth grade to the JFK AFM complex for next year. There is a provision in our regional agreement that allows, to be able to do that if we need to. And frankly, on the survey we'll be sending to parents, they are school specific for each child. So you will need to fill one out for each of your children. But for our elementary families, we ask you just kind of straight out that question. Would you support the reorganization of our elementary schools for this upcoming school year in order to get our K through 3 students back full-time in full-time instruction? And so that piece of information is really important to us when we think about how do we proceed from here. So that's one piece. The other part of the equation is the staffing. So through essentially our CARES Act money, through a grant to the Department of Education, we are allowed to and need to spend this particular grant, which is about $380,000 on startup money, startup costs. We have to use it to support getting our students back in school. And so what we are looking to do is provide an assistant, long-term sub, partner teacher. We're calling it many different things, but essentially a second person to partner with all of our teachers in grades 1, 2, and 3 to be the second teacher in that other classroom to help supervise the students, to help keep them on task while the teacher is working with the other group of students and vice versa. The other thing I think that's really important about that particular model is we cannot have a sub-list of adults that are moving between multiple districts. We can't have that. As it stands before the pandemic, we would have a day-to-day sub-list, the people that would work in Bellingham or Uxbridge, Northbridge, and BMR, right? And we kind of go down a list if we had a teacher out. We can't do that. That's a safety issue. And so what we're looking to also do is to make sure that we have all hands on deck in order to support our children and our staff as we move through at least the first 60 to 90 days. And you'll notice, you see the first 60 to 90 days, and you're going to see it in some other places. That is because if you remember our first couple of slides, we talked about this idea of going slow. So we want to move slow. We want to check our benchmarks. We want to make sure that everybody's staying healthy. And so we're not looking at this as a 180-day fix. We're looking at this as a moment or a segment in time. I'm going to pause here and ask Ms. PG if she can speak a bit more about our special populations work.
Jason, before you do that, and I know that a question came in, and we don't usually interrupt for questions, so we allow people to comment in public forum, but this one seems relevant because it's something you said, and it was, are these preliminary plans due to the Department of Ed tomorrow? If so, is there time to make any changes? So the preliminary plan, correct me if I'm wrong, is due tomorrow.
Yes.
And it's just an overarching concept plan.
Yep.
It's not, the specifics can be changed when the actual plan goes in August 10th. So
that's right.
To make that clear. I think I have that.
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying that. And I don't want anyone to hit the panic button and think that what we're submitting tomorrow we have to do. We don't. So I don't want people panicked over this. but this is our starting point, right? So there will be many conversations between now and August 10th, when we have to submit our final plan. And I will say we are in the same situation that every other system is in the state. We're operating on the same timelines. Some districts, a couple of districts, got ahead of it, and they submitted some plans before they were supposed to. Many of those plans have since changed or been revised. We are staying right on the timeline that our commissioner has asked us to. So if folks are wondering about that, just to give them a sense of the timeline. Jill?
Sure. So I'm sure that most of you know the Department of Ed did put out guidance on our fall 2020 reopening, and including consideration for special education students. So, you know, they did continue to enforce that school districts must continue to provide a free, appropriate public education consistent with the need to protect the health and safety of not only our students, but, you know, the teachers that work with them. And the guidance notes that students with disabilities, and particularly our preschool age students and those with significant and complex needs, should be prioritized for receiving in-person instruction as much as feasible. So even in a hybrid model, if that's in place, every effort is to be made to continue to provide up to full-time in-person instruction to the identified students. So if for any reason full-time is not possible, again, we don't know, things will continue to change. School districts are still encouraged to provide as many services as possible. So our goal as a district, if we are in a hybrid model, is to maximize in-person learning for our youngest students, which would be our preschool students with disabilities, and our students with significant complex disabilities, which means identified students will be provided with increased opportunities for in-school learning. And our goal is to have these students participate in each day an in-person learning takes place, because we know that remote learning is very challenging for these students. In addition to our special ed students, the guidance is also asking schools to make sure that our English language learners, those with significant needs, our level 1s, 2s, are students who haven't received a lot of instruction in schooling or had interrupted schooling before coming here, will also be prioritized to maximize that in-person learning, because again, that language development, you know, needs to continue. So that is our goal as a district, to make sure that we're having, no matter what model we have, any in-person days, we're able to maximize those in-person for our special population students.
Thanks, Ms. Pugy.
Mm-hmm.
So just in summary, K-3, we are looking to be a full in-person model. Separate classrooms, so about 10 kids in each room, depending upon the number of families that opt for in-person, with their obviously their classroom teacher and a full-time partner teacher, long-term sub type position to just assist the teacher and help the students stay on task for at least the first 60 to 90 days. But again, we need to look at the actual spacing of that. And so families, that question will be going out to you in a survey. So we look forward to hearing your feedback on that. And hopefully Monday evening you can join the Facebook Live. So this moves us to our grades 4 through 12. And so grades 4 through 12, we're doing something I think fairly unique in terms of our hybrid model. So that is what we are preliminarily proposing. As it stands, the first kind of thinking around how our hybrid model might work, we might even be shifting from this. So I'll share specifics of what I mean in a moment. But the way we are thinking about a hybrid model would be we would have some in-person learning and then some remote learning, right? So it's basically, we would split the students into 2 different groups in each building, grades 4 through 12, and we would do some in-person and some remote. What we will do as far as splitting the students is manage it by alphabet to make sure we keep families together. And so families, when you take the survey, it'll be really important, again, to let us know your children's name or names, and so that we're able to keep groups of families together so that your in-person learning is on the same day and your remote learning is on the same day. However, one of the things that we are going to be able to offer through a very strong partnership with our Boys and Girls Club in Blackstone, and I could not be more thankful to the leadership of the Boys and Girls Club and to their board, is that on days when our children in grades 4 through 8 are remote, so that means that they would be at home learning, they will have an opportunity to attend the Boys and Girls Club for the school day. Parents, so that you can go to work, to be frank, and that your children can get additional tutoring and support from our staff during the day, so that we can have as close to a seamless week of instruction as we can get in a hybrid model. And what we will do, because students are in groups, right? So in one particular hybrid model that we're sharing here, there's this concept of 2 days of instruction, a day of remote learning for everybody, and then 2 days of instruction for the other group, or the second group. And I'll kind of explain that in a minute. I think we're moving away from that model, but that was the one we had initially spoke about. So the idea would be that on those remote days, parents would be able to sign up. We will have limited seating for the Boys and Girls Club. We will have our staff there, and I'll explain the staffing piece in a moment. And so parents would be able to bring their child there for the school day. We understand that this model is taxing and is really difficult for working families, and we get it. And so we're trying to help assist with that while keeping the students learning and moving forward with their instruction. So that speaks a bit about grades 4 through 8. In grades 9 through 12, we're going to do a similar model, but at the high school. And we're going to use the large spaces that, frankly, we won't be able to use for instruction, at least in the fall, because of the virus. So the gym, the library, the auditorium, and what we will do is section off, just like we'll do with the Boys and Girls Club, the large space into smaller spaces, and be able to provide some additional tutoring, not to every student. There'll be limited seating again, but for those students who need the additional support, they'll be able to get it. And we will work to keep the students in a cohort, in a group, so they're not cross-mixing with other grades and other students, the best we can to keep everybody safe, but also to help, again, keep the learning moving, but also, give students who need a place to go and need that sense of security until we can get our schools open full time. And so, some at home might be saying, well, then if you can do that, why don't you just do it full time? Well, we can't. Unfortunately, we can't do it full time for everybody. We don't have the space. The Boys and Girls Club can only hold so many students. And so we wouldn't be able to have everybody there in grades 4 through 8 on the remote days. That wouldn't work. But we certainly can do it, for those who need it, and try our best to meet that need while helping our students move forward. And how we're going to staff that. I'm sure some folks are wondering about that at home. Again, through a partnership with our towns and in utilizing some of their CARES resources, which is a grant that all of our towns and school system received. They're going to help support 10 temporary long-term subs that we can use to staff the Boys and Girls Club. We can use to staff, these places at the high school. And so it certainly isn't going to be a perfect model, but it certainly is. It is a way to keep kids engaged, to keep them supervised, to keep them learning, and to help parents be able to go to work and breathe a little bit, and be able to focus on the work that they need to do to care for their families. So, I wanted to share that piece out with everybody. And again, I know Ms. PG spoke a bit about the in-person learning for our special populations. And one of the pieces that needs to be highlighted here is students that are in the remote learning model. And so that's whether you are part of a hybrid, right? So when you're at home doing your 2 days of remote, or if you're at the Boys and Girls Club, or the high school and the gymnasium, or if you are full-time in a remote model. So you're not in the hybrid. You've decided to stay home and do remote learning. It is really important to underscore to our community that that is not the work that's assigned is not optional. Attendance will be taken. It will have a very tight structure to it. So we'll go through that in a moment, but I just wanted to capture that briefly because we're discussing this hybrid model now. So we have one example here. Again, this is not the particular model I think that we're going to end up going with, but it is one that a lot of people are talking about throughout the Blackstone Valley. So I want to share it because my sense is our parents will hear about it. I know our teachers have because some people commented, why are we looking at this if we're looking at a different model anyhow? But I think it's important too because people are talking a lot about this 2-1-2, and I'm sure you may have heard that expression. This is what that model refers to. It refers to, in a hybrid model, you have a cohort A, a group of students on in-person learning Monday and Tuesday, while cohort B is at home doing remote learning Monday or Tuesday, or at the Boys and Girls Club. Everybody would be remote learning on Wednesday, and then cohort B would be an in-person learning Thursday, Friday, while cohort A is doing remote learning. I think ultimately what we move forward with a hybrid will look something like this. But I do know a lot of systems in the Blackstone Valley are going forward with this model. What we are trying to tease out is really capturing that third day of instruction every other week. So possibly having a model for hybrid that looks like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for group A in person, and then Thursday, Friday for group B, and then switching it the following week. The challenge with that, of course, is every other week your child's schedule will flip, right? They'll pick up an extra day of instruction, which is great from a teaching and learning perspective. But when you're trying to coordinate childcare for your child, 4th, 5th grade, or middle school, or high school for that matter, it does cause a snag in that level of consistency. So we still need to think through that. But I did think it was important to just share both, because those are the conversations that we're having at this point. So to bring a little bit of clarity to that. And then lastly, our preliminary thinking on remote. This is really critical that families hear. The remote model that we implement in our hybrid, or at any point in the year for that matter, if we have to shift to all remote because of the virus or something, is going to look very different than what the spring looked like. It is going to be very structured. Kids will be learning for a full school day. Teachers will be available and delivering instruction routinely throughout the day. It's going to look very, very different. Attendance will be taken every day. Right now, our learning management system, so how we're going to continue moving forward with where we put all of our work for our students and how they access that work, will be our Google Classroom platform. All of our assignments will be graded, truly graded in Aspen, parents. I know some of you might be thankful for that. You'll be able to log right in and see what's going on, and they'll have a grade, and you can get the feedback on the assignment. With that, our trimester report cards for elementary school and quarterly report cards and progress reports are not going to change. It's going to be school. So I really want to make sure that folks understand, because it's going to feel different and look different, because it is going to be very different than what we did in the spring. And to our high school families and students, their student work, those grades will count toward their GPA. We're not doing a credit, no credit thing. The grades are going to count. For our middle school families, I know some of you might be really happy to hear this, and some of you may not be very happy to hear this. The model we launched at the start of this at the middle school, where we actually we ran a bell schedule, and kids met with the teachers in different periods and rotated through this schedule. This is going to look much more like that than what we had to shift to. There needs to be an accountability piece in for all of us in terms of making sure that the kids are learning what they need to. Let me pause here for a moment, Jane, because from here we shift into health and safety. I don't know if we want to tackle this by segment, if the committee has any specific questions about the teaching and learning plans before we move into health and safety, or if the committee would prefer.
Sure, no, yeah, let's do that, Jason. Let's see if people have some questions. I also want to do a little bit more on that remote piece and indicate that families will have that option initially to choose that. Even if the district chooses to go into a hybrid, a family can choose remote as their option.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then I know that Jason didn't really get into the guiding principles. You said you all know them, but I think I want to talk a little bit further, because there really are some underlying principles as the committees met to develop that, and they are exactly had Jason outlined, but safety first, and our goal to mitigate risks. We will never avoid all risk. There is not any plan when you walk out your door that avoids all risk. So if you've left your house at all, you've had risk. And so what we do is we attempt to mitigate that risk, and safety first was one underlying principle. We have been mission focused. The fundamental principle in our planning is what is our mission. But we ask that you be flexible. The guidelines will change, the conditions will change. We keep getting things from the Department of Education that seem to change or add. And so you hear us talking about 60 to 90 days, because that's what we've been asked to plan out to. We may need to, after 30 days, reevaluate this and move to a different phase, or we need that nimbleness, that flexibility of everyone to be patient with this. So while you'll hear us say 60 days or 90 days, it could be longer than that. It could be shorter than that. It could be a different plan altogether. But this is a new normal. People have to understand it. We have to have a reimagined way of teaching and learning and working. This is not anything anybody's done before, but it is a new normal. So, carpets on the floor or whatever, little couches are not a way, but people have learned in different formats before. People will learn in different formats now, and we're asking for your patience, but we're also asking for your guidance. So you'll have an opportunity to respond. You'll have an opportunity. I know that people are writing in, and I think that's great. If you want to speak during public forum, we'll give you that opportunity. But we will have the Facebook Live. We will get to your questions. You can reach out to any school member. I know we have a lot more of this to get through, but I wanted to get that out there because questions are kind of coming in. And I'm answering them as best I can. But so do school committee members have any questions or concerns or comments they want to make at this point?
Jane, I have a question.
Yeah, Karen.
So if my child chooses hybrid and whatever variation that ends up with, when they are on the remote cycle of that, do they have access to a teacher? Like, are they getting remote learning, or is it more that they're going to be working on independent projects to bolster what's already been taught? And then a second part of that question is, are those remote teachers the same that the people who chose remote are working with, if that makes sense?
Yeah, Karen, I really appreciate the question, and because it's a tricky one, right? And it's one that we keep processing, and so. In our conversations with the teachers today, we actually were having that exact same discussion, and we were looking at it from the teacher perspective in terms of, how do we plan for two groups of kids? Like, how do we keep that learning going? And so one of the parts of the conversation was framed around this idea of, we develop our lessons for, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for all kids, right? All students, so that you have this continuity of learning. So if you're in front of a teacher, say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday, you're remote, right? So maybe you're home or you're at the Boys and Girls Club, the work that you started the first part of the week, you're gonna continue working on. And so what we have to figure out is, yes, we'll have tutors available to help the students with their learning if they choose, if the family chooses the Boys and Girls Club or the student chooses to go to high school or something. What we have to figure out is how do we provide access and support to students on their remote days? Because one of the things we want to be really careful of is that we don't want the freshman taking Algebra 1 to have one teacher for the first part of the week and then a second teacher when they're remote, because when they go back to school on Monday, it's going to be a reset of that instruction if the teacher from the remote days is teaching a different way or a different method, or teaching a different approach than their classroom teacher does. So we still have to figure that out at this point.
Can I interject something here, which connects to this question and also to Jane's comments earlier regarding our flexibility? The district as a whole will absolutely need to be flexible, and we will need to be prepared at a moment's notice to pivot. And we are going to do that. But one of the things that I also would like to try to stress with families is this is a fluid situation for the district. However, we cannot have constant fluidity for individual families or children. So I wanted to emphasize this because yes, there's choices, and yes, there's opportunities to change those choices to some extent. But in order for a system like this to run effectively and to be successful, students can't say that they're going to be coming to the hybrid model one week and then the next week decide they're going to go remote and then want to return to the hybrid model the next week, and on Tuesday decide they're going to go, but they can't show up for their Monday program. So it's one of those things where we really do need accurate counts. We need to be organized to a T in order to make this as successful as possible, and understanding that there can't be a ton of flip-flopping in the midst of what it is that we're trying to accomplish in the programs. That will be really, really helpful for the district. So I just wanted to put that out there. We need to be fluid, we need to be flexible, but we also need to have some commitment to the decisions that get made.
Karen, the best we could, we tried to answer that.
Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, I was going to say, well, the only other question, so the full remote, like for parents or families that choose full remote,
Yep.
Are they in a separate pod almost, like
Yes.
separate pool of teachers,
Yes.
going along at their own steady rate? Okay, that was my,
Yeah.
that's good. All right, thank you.
That part's almost easier for us to resolve.
Exactly,
It's how do we get the direct access to teachers on the remote day?
right,
Those teachers are working with a different group of kids.
exactly.
We
Okay,
can get them
thank
access to a teacher or to a paraprofessional or a substitute. I mean, that's not the question. The question is, how do we connect them to the right adult? Does that make sense?
Okay, it does.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Jane, Tammy has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Tammy. I'm sorry. I'm also reading. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa.
I wasn't sure if you were waiting for something else, Jane. So I have a bunch of questions. I'm just going to piggyback on Karen's first. For the full remote, not homeschooling, fully remote, run by the district, right? Homeschooling is a different entity.
Yes.
Okay, so fully remote, you're going to have teachers assigned to those students. Part of what we saw in the months that we did fully remote was conversations about, parents are working 9 to 5 and can't help kids maybe during that time. Is there going to be, or have we talked about, I know there's discussions going on with teachers and other situations outside of this conversation, that maybe perhaps we tape lessons so that maybe you're in a Google Meet, you're teaching in the moment to students, but recording those lessons so that if someone misses it for whatever reason, then they can go back and get that learning from a certified teacher later.
Yes. So in the guidance that the Department of Education released specifically on remote learning, it clearly defines the need for both types of instruction. So that live and in-person instruction, but also for some of those, and also, Tammy, it could be some of the pre-recorded. It may not even necessarily be a lesson that the teacher taught live to that group, but it might be something that they're going to record, have the kids watch first, and then attend the Google Hangout, right? Almost like a flipped classroom.
What classroom? Sure.
To kind of work through. So yeah, so the notion is it'd be both.
Okay. I think the remote really needs that more live teaching, scheduled live teaching, consistent on a day-to-day basis in order to be successfully brought forth to kids and continue learning. You have to have that piece. I'm teaching now, so I do 5 half-hour live lessons with 15 minutes in between for independent work, and to allow kids to get up and do what they need to do and give their eyes a break. But I think it's really a successful model to engage learning.
I definitely agree with that. That makes
If
Jason, I want to reiterate to folks that are watching that when you send the survey out, you will also be sending this PowerPoint or Google Slides or whatever you created this on, and the recording of this meeting, or this portion of this recording, correct?
I've asked Jesse who runs our video to link, just lift this part of the school committee meeting, so I can actually send this whole conversation with the PowerPoint.
Yep, perfect.
Yep.
Jason, for teachers, for the hybrid model, teachers will be in every day.
Yes.
Is that true or not true? 5 days a week, teachers will be in the building, and what role they play, whether it's virtual or live with students in front of them, will depend on where we go from here.
And I'll tell you, the only reason that that wasn't the case in the spring was because the governor had issued a stay-at-home order. So providing that doesn't happen, and we're still moving along with our phased reopening the way that we are, we're all in. I mean, everybody will be in the classroom each day. Yep.
For the, does anybody else want to go in between? You may have the same questions as me, and I don't want to hog the thought process here.
Well, and I am getting a lot of bus questions, and I will remind people that we still have a lot of details that are coming up in terms of that Matt's going to address in terms of cleaning and buses and those kinds of things. So give us time. We knew this would take a while. All right. Does anybody besides Tammy? And you guys, just so you know, because Jason's sharing his screen, I don't see everybody. So if you do have something you want to say, you just might have to.
Jane.
Go ahead.
As far as the remote learning center at the Boys and Girls Club, if it's going to be our teacher assistants or substitutes, is there going to be like a lead teacher there on hand or some sort of district supervision? That was my question.
Yeah, so we're actually thinking right now, and it depends on the numbers, and depends upon how many how many students want to attend on a regular basis, what we need that staffing specifically to look like. But there will absolutely be our district staff and our instructional coaches partnering with those individuals to make sure that they have what they need from a teaching and learning place to help the students correctly. The other part that's really important about that, which I haven't mentioned yet, but when we talk about meeting the behavioral health needs and social emotional health needs, is a lot of work that Ms. PG will talk about in a moment. But we are also working on a 90-day contract with Family Continuity to bring on board 2 more clinicians through a private clinical agency to help our students when they come back to school. And so my sense is, Sarah, on like the behavioral, social, emotional side, we'll be able to use some of the clinical staff to help out at our offsite place, along with our instructional coaches, the permanent subs or building subs that we're going to hire that we're going to send there. And you'll hear a little bit more about a lead nurse that we'll need as we move forward, and that will help address the safety concerns.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jane, I have a question.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Okay. I really like this model and I think it's great. My only concern is that on the off days that you're doing the remote part, whether you're the Monday, Tuesday in person, Thursday, Friday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday remote, I just want to make sure that it's robust and it's a good amount of time that the kids are learning. And I just want to make sure it's new learning, moving the learning forward. Because I know that they're going to be teaching on Monday and Tuesday, but then is the rest of the week going to be just a recap of the beginning? I think that's what I was hearing just a little while ago, and I just wanted to make sure that there is teacher FaceTime during those days. And I don't know how it's going to work because I know that there's another group of kids that are, in front of the teachers. And I know the hybrid model is a very complicated situation all around. But I want to make sure that we're consistently moving forward, and just make sure that's into consideration, especially during those remote days. Because I know a lot of the times we did change it up a little bit in the spring. And I think, it would be good to really make sure it's robust and they're moving forward on those remote days.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, Wendy. What we don't want to have happen is, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, a chunk of learning happened and then it just stops. And it's basically just like busy work, right? Thursday.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I really don't want to see that.
No, agreed.
Great.
That's going to be an important part of our planning in terms of how we lay that out.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the safety part after, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll save that for after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tammy, you got something else?
No one else has any questions?
I have another question too, but you might have the same one as me, Tammy.
Go ahead,
You
Tammy.
take it.
Go
Go
for
ahead,
your
you
turn.
go.
Well, my question's about specialists, remote and the kind of special subjects. So remote and in person, we're still going to have access to them, all
Yes.
kids.
Yes, but
And-
go ahead, Karen. I'm sorry.
Well, and I was going to say, right now, I know that specialists go from kindergarten to first to second to third to fourth, and sometimes to the middle school, which leads a whole level of contamination, which would probably fall in safety. So if you want to address that after, but are we doing something to minimize
Yes. so-
contact as they move?
Absolutely. So once we have the final plan adopted, right, we know the exact structure, we are going to need to look at where our specialists are located. Actually, we were just having this conversation with some teachers earlier in the week about that. The challenge in telling you exactly where everybody's going to be right now is we don't, this is just a preliminary plan. But once the final plan is approved, then we can actually start assigning people to specific buildings because we really do need to mitigate that movement. And so that's an important piece. The other part, though, that I really want to underscore here is last Friday, the Department of Education released their guidance on phys ed, visual arts, band, and theater, and chorus. And as you can imagine, it's very unfortunate the limitations now that we have on students' abilities to do those things, particularly with chorus and with any musicals that we might want to do, and with band, because of the droplets and the proximity that people typically need to be in with one another. I had a conversation as recently as today, as a matter of fact, with our director of marching band, Todd Schaefer, and we talked a bit about some different ideas that he and the music department are kind of thinking through, at least on the band side, the instrumental side of things. And along with Esther Cody, our union president, we're actually going to be scheduling a meeting with all the specialists to talk a little bit about, how can we do this different? Because I will say one of the things I'm very proud of, some systems unfortunately did cut those, positions, particularly in light of what we, were worried about being a significant budget challenge. We didn't. So what we need to do is think of a way to keep the arts really engaging and exciting for our kids, because the regulations we have from the department are really different than what the kids are used to. But we are going to make it work.
Again, a new normal.
Yep.
Thank you.
Tammy, was that you? I don't think so.
Okay. No. Okay. So hybrid model. I personally think that, and I know, Jason, I think you said in your presentation that you're still toying, or the group is toying with this idea. If you're going to do a hybrid model of an A and B group, I don't think it should be a Monday, Tuesday for one group. It should be a Monday, Wednesday, or something spread a little bit more. So they're seeing, I mean, with a Monday, Tuesday, you're going Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday without potentially seeing your teacher or a teacher. So, I mean, I'm hoping if we do that model, I'm not a big fan of the so-called cleaning day. I think that we should be using all 5 days. I hope we can figure out how to do that. That makes it easy for parents to get coverage or childcare or whatever has to happen there. But I personally think that we're going to be cleaning throughout the day. We're going to be cleaning at the end of the day. Having a whole day of cleaning at the expense of potentially children's learning, I'm not sure I'm a fan of personally, but there's that. And I do definitely think if we do hybrid, that it shouldn't be Monday, Tuesday. It should be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, separate the days there. I love that grades are going to count. I love that we're going to provide feedback and assessment. We lost that a little bit along the way at the end of last year. I think that is so important. The minute you tell a kid something is optional, I mean, that was the worst email as a parent I ever received from another district, that it was optional in the first, 2 or 3 weeks of this. What do you do with that when you have an unmotivated kid? So I love the grading part. The move of MES and making sort of satellite schools. I think it's going to help with the safety at the end of the day. And I think that with the remote, if we do the hybrid model, I think it's going to help with that also, because teachers are going to be able to support teachers at that grade level, figuring out the resources that they need and what resources are good for remote learning. And I think that's going to benefit all kids. Hybrid. And this is probably for Jill. If we do a hybrid model, are students in specialized programs going to go every day?
So yes, if we are in a hybrid, like I said before, we are prioritizing. The Department of Ed made it very clear that we really need to make every effort to get our high priority, our most significant kids, which include our earliest learners, our preschool, as well as our students with more complex needs, so more of our substantially separate classrooms. So that is our goal, yes, to get our students in, yes.
And speaking of our substantially separate classrooms, and I always forget what you call it, Jill, and I apologize. I call it trade, you call it something else, but the goal is vocational skills going out into the community. What's that going to look like as of now?
So actually, we have a special education return and recovery team, and that's something we actually have been talking about. I have my high school team chair on there, and some of the things that we're talking about is, number one, we have to make sure that we're allowed to go out and it's safe to get our kids out into the community. If we are, it might start with more outside type of activities. In the interim, we're actually exploring some other things that we can bring in for programs for the classroom, whether it's online. And we also have an apartment in our high school, as well as a foods lab. So the kids will continue to make use of those. When it comes to the vocational, it may not be, if it's not available, we're going to think of creative ways to make sure our kids can continue to move forward and gain those skills, because that's what their IEP goals, and we still need to provide them that education. So we actually are investigating those. And as soon as we have the okay, if we can get out into the community, that's what we plan to do. But when we do go out, our groups and our numbers will be smaller, because we want to make sure our students are also safe on transportation and well supported in environments on the outside. But like I said, they could start when the weather's nice, more of outside activities. You know what I mean? To start integrating the kids out there. Because remember, it's not just vocation. We talk about, community safety, We talk about a lot of things in the community. So we're working on those ways right now, actually, to make sure we're able to move forward with our older students.
Okay. I think that is all for me.
For
I
this
love.
section?
No, I mean, I think Wendy's question was definitely something like we can't stay stagnant, teach 2 days and call it a week. We can't
No,
do that.
agreed.
And so I love that. And, I hope there's an option to record lessons. I know at the college level, professors are teaching to people in front of them while it's being recorded. People at home are the other half of that class. I don't know if we could ever get that to work in public school, but
Actually,
Brian,
Tammy, they're not being recorded. They're teaching live. There's a camera. So when I'm teaching, there will be a camera on me, and I will have students who are on the Zoom, and I will have students who are in the classroom.
Right,
And that's
okay.
the same way that my daughter's high school is doing it as well. They will have half the group in and half the group online, and then the next day, and the teacher's the same, and the work is the same, and
I love that model.
Jane, can I just jump in really quick and then I'll let Jason finish the safety part of it because I'm looking forward to that. But I know there's a lot of hybrid models going around. I know there's different points of view on which hybrid model is the best. And I think everybody has a different lens on the hybrid, on which hybrid would be the best. Some say 1 week on, 1 week off. Some say Monday, Wednesday. Some say Monday, Tuesday. I'm in favor of the safest and the most deep the way we can deep clean these schools is the most important, safety first. And, I know that you're driving that force on, making it a safe place for the kids to come. And, I just wanted to make a point that, my personal opinion is Monday, Tuesday, but in less transition. But I think leaving it, to whatever decision is made. But I just have to reiterate that there needs to be synchronous learning every single day, whether it's remote, whether it's, whether you're there or not, there needs to be FaceTime with someone. It's just so important. It keeps them moving, and it keeps the routine going. So I just wanted to say that.
I have one question too. Sorry.
okay, go ahead, Tara.
Just can you elaborate more on what the optional tutoring covers?
Yeah, so we were trying to get a couple bites of that apple, so to speak, with this particular part of the plan. And so I was mentioning for 4th through 8th grade, we're looking at how do we, provide a safe place for kids to be during the day so parents can go to work, right? We don't want parents to have to make that decision between, do I leave my child at home, by him or herself while I try to provide for my family? How do I kind of balance all of this? So, the main goal was around safety. The second goal was around, obviously, the academic piece and wanting to be able to provide, a safe place where we have some long-term subs available, adults available to work with children and to support them with whatever their projects are, whatever, reading, essay development, whatever it is that they need to do on their remote days. So they would bring their Chromebook, all of their work with them, and we would greet them first thing in the morning, right? So it'd run like a typical school day in terms of the time that they would be there. And then we'd also set up some enrichment activities for the students. Again, we do it safely, but we do it in a way that, they could work on an art project and have an opportunity to kind of build that skill set, exercise that muscle a little bit too while they're there. We'll provide lunch. So we'll make sure that we have food provided, as we've been doing for the Boys and Girls Club. And we'll have some of our clinicians, our 2 counselors that we're looking to bring on board, check in over there. Our instructional coaches make sure that the adults have what they need, that are working with the students. We'll set up, if you're not familiar with the Boys and Girls Club space, it's a great space. It's big. I mean, there's a lot of room. So when I met with their executive director and director, who they were just fantastic, Bruce and Sarah, we talked about how we could divide the space up. So we'd have small cohorts of students. And so, for instance, Tara, if you have a 5th grader and that 5th grader has, 5 or 6 kids from, his or her class that all decide to sign up, we'd keep those kids together in a little cohort. So we wouldn't have this expansive where kids are all over the place. We'd keep the kids, with their masks in a small space, all working together. So parents can have a peace of mind that they can go to work and not worry while their child's being fed, cared for. They're working with their academics. They have an adult that can help tutor them. And they'll have a little bit of an opportunity for enrichment.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I guess I just didn't realize. Yes. Yeah, thank you. I didn't realize that was what the Boys and Girls Club is optional tutoring. So thank you for explaining that.
Okay. Sorry if I wasn't more elaborate.
I might have just missed it.
So
Thank you.
Jason, there are a couple questions about this whole concept of K through 3 students who are in a very staid learning environment, if you will, a very kind of regimented, for those of you who went to school in my era, an older era way of learning. And so the questions are, how are sending elementary school children into that kind of sterile environment better than, remote learning, keeping them at home? I have some personal answers to that, but I'm sure that you have some as well. But one of the ones that I believe the research says is children in front of teachers, personally in front of teachers, whether that teacher is 6 feet away, 12 feet away, 20 feet away, but in the same room live, is a benefit to the children, and the research will show that. But also, student interaction happens 6 feet away, 10 feet away, 20 feet away. Student interaction happens.
Right.
I am a product of an elementary school system that was in rows. The desks were far apart. The students couldn't reach out to other students, and had a very robust learning and elementary school program. It is different. It is, again, a new normal. But I think families are going to have to make some decisions for what's best for their children and their family. Again, I have a child who says, put me in a mask, put me 6 feet apart, put me in a hallway, but put me in school. That's my child. That may not be yours. So, but I don't know if you want to address that.
Yeah. No, I'm actually really glad that question was asked, because we talked about that today with our teachers too. That issue came up because the notion of the classroom that our students left, not being the one, not being the classroom that they're going to come back to is the right notion. I mean, it is, right? So we obviously know that just by talking about the setup, and we'll, by the way, have some visuals for families so they can actually see what the classroom setup will be. But from the perspective of the actual environment, we were discussing the notion of, for our kindergarten, maybe even first grade students, getting some different type of equipment for their actual desks. They make all kinds of really interesting things to help students in the classroom stay focused, get their wiggles out. So some students use kind of almost like one of the big medicine balls you see at the gym that you kind of sit on. They use that so that they can kind of swivel around while they're at their desk. Some students have these kind of textured rubber kind of balancing seats that they sit on that also kind of plays with their balance, so they're able to kind of move. Something as simple as I use as an elementary school teacher, Velcro strips. If I had students that had a really hard time focusing, I put the Velcro strip under the desk. They could rub their finger on it. It was just that tactile piece that gave them a little bit of that touch that they needed. So there's a lot of creative ways. And so we are definitely committed to working with our kindergarten staff to make sure that they have what they need. Because I will say, I would rather take on that challenge of how do we get the environment to be as engaging as we can with the way it has to be set up, but have that direct instruction for 5 and 6 year olds on how to sound out, how to decode, sound out words, put sentences together, work on counting, math, addition, subtraction, etc. So the physical environment that stuff we can tackle that. You know, there are also things that are called brain breaks, mindfulness, things that we can do. Kids can do right at their desks. They can get up, push your chair in, stretch, you know, touch their toes. There's a lot of little tricks, and a lot of our teachers know these things. They're really good at those things. But I will say it's going to force us to be real creative.
I just wanted to bring up, Jason, this might be a good point. When we're talking about these breaks, I also have the Return and Recovery SEL, the social emotional team. And one of the things that we're looking to put in, as well as, you know, implementing some of the social emotional aspects, because we feel very strongly that this should be at the forefront as we open school to get our kids comfortable and in a safe place in order to learn. But one of the things that our team is doing, and I'm great. I have some fantastic folks. They are psychologists, school adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, are coming up with some activities in the form of a toolbox for our teachers. So they're able to implement those things. They have a place to go if they're not sure what to do. And it does include those things like brain breaks and mindfulness and, you know, what is it, sensational, you know, different types of activities in the classroom. So teachers kind of have a go-to to get kids, do you know what I mean? Not just sitting to have those, you know, small, but movement breaks or mindfulness moments or how to, you know, just gonna get those wiggles out. So that's something that they're also working very hard at to help support our staff, to support our kids.
Jason, do we have, or how can a parent get any details from the Boys and Girls Club? I know they're in preliminary development as well, but in terms of reservation system, cost, et cetera.
So there's no cost. I should have mentioned that. There is no cost. Yeah, no, we as a school system, it's a service we're providing to our families. But there will be limited seating. So, you know, we are, as I had mentioned earlier, we are applying for a grant, which we'll get. You know, every school system is going to receive an opportunity to apply for this grant, and it's essentially relief for local systems. And so we'll be using that grant, those grant dollars, with approval of the school committee, of course, to be able to provide this opportunity to our families. And again, I can't speak highly enough of the leadership of the Boys and Girls Club, their board, their executive director, the director of programs. They're just amazing. And, you know, when we slipped into this model in the spring, you know, they opened up for essential workers, and it's been a really great partnership with them through all of that. So we're going to continue that partnership. They were eager to find out how they can help us. But to our families listening, there's no cost for that. All we would need is for you to be able to get your child there and pick your child up. And so, I mean, that the transportation piece I know might be somewhat of a challenge, but to be honest with you, even that, you know, Mr. Aaronworth and I were talking about how could we be creative around that. We don't know yet. It all depends on the transportation part, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, there's no.
So I do think we should get to that and maybe have people committee members save their questions.
All right.
Till the end of the next phase. And somebody asked new calendar. We will be looking at the calendar when we approve the plan on the 6th of August. Okay, you're back.
All right, Mr. Aaronworth.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So I will walk us through some of our more operational aspects of the what is to come. So first and foremost, everyone in the community should know that we are all going to be wearing masks. The expectation is that families will provide masks and that teachers will bring their own masks. That being said, there will be spares because we're pretty confident that every one of the children will misplace their mask at some point in time, and same goes for all of the faculty as well. So we will have additional masks, but we do ask as best as possible for everyone to send their students in with masks and for teachers to bring their own. We will be incorporating mask breaks during the day while students are 6 feet apart. Good point about masks. This came up a number of times in our committees. What happens if students don't want to wear masks? If a child has a medical reason that they can't wear a mask, or if they have a disability that prevents them from wearing a mask appropriately, there will be exceptions made and proper spacing will be arranged for those students to be without masks. If, while we respect everyone's right to free speech and their choice, students that are choosing not to wear masks or are refusing to wear masks when they're asked to by staff, they will be asked to opt into the remote learning program. We cannot have anyone coming into the district that is supposed to be wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. That will have to be something that we're consistent with. Additionally, with respect to masks, we will be providing a number of our teachers with transparent masks. They have a transparent window, and those are for younger students learning learning literacy and for studying phonemes. It also assists for students that have hearing impairments. So we're going to have those masks available. Physical distancing is an important piece of this entire plan. So please know, the Department of Ed put out a recommendation that chairs be a minimum of 3 feet apart. That's not acceptable to us. That's not acceptable for our staff or our kids. The district is, as best as possible, going to be trying to arrange the desks to be 6 feet apart. We say as best as possible. So we have assessed all of our classrooms for the capability to fit desks at 6 feet apart. On average, a classroom in our district fits about 16 desks spaced 6 feet apart. And that's 6 feet apart in every direction. So they would be to the right, to the left, front and behind, a person not within 6 feet of them. What does as close as possible mean? If there's a situation where we need to have 17 desks in a classroom in order to keep a class together, that may shrink down to 5 feet 10 inches, maybe 5 feet 9 inches. However, once we get past a certain point where we're going past 5 feet or even possibly a larger distance than that for all of the desks, we'll be reconfiguring the classrooms and figuring out what we need to do to split that class up more effectively. But our goal is as close as possible to 6 feet. So with respect to that, we are going to make sure that we are keeping students apart physically with respect to their desks. We're also going to be looking at breaking students up into small groups and limiting their movement. So at the elementary level, what you'll see is predominantly students will be staying in the same room. Specialists will more than likely be coming into classrooms so that students are not transitioning. As Dr. DeFalco mentioned, there will be opportunities for classes to sign out outside spaces. We will have tents available at the schools. So that will provide a break for students, and some specialists may opt to use those spaces as well. But predominantly, students will remain as best as possible in their classrooms. At the middle and high school level, we will be trying to group students, as Dr. DeFalco mentioned, into cohorts. So students that are remaining with their cohorts through the course of the day, even if they do have some transition, it will limit the amount of students that they're exposed to. Additionally, we are trying to entertain the use of block scheduling, which will potentially change how students are getting their length of classes. So potentially, instead of having 5 classes every day, students may only get 2 classes one day, and then on the next day, another 2 classes, or their 3 classes that they didn't get the other day, just to limit the amount of transitions. That is going to be a big focus. The schedules will potentially look different at each building level, elementary, middle, and high school, because of the nature of the academics that are offered and how it is that students are scheduled based on their course needs. But please know that we are going to be potentially staggering transition times. We are potentially, when we talk about transportation, going to be staggering entry and dismissal times. We will be doing everything that we can to minimize large group interaction and keep kids as consistent as possible with cohorts and potentially in the same place all day as best as possible. As Dr. DeFalco mentioned, we know this is going to be a bit of a change for what we try to do typically. We love interaction and we want kids to be engaging with everyone else, but these special circumstances call for these special actions, and our priority is the safety and well-being.
So,
So-
ooh, whoa, something funky just happened here. I lost my, oh. Matt,
Yes,
some
I
of
can
the
still
questions,
see you and see everyone else.
you can hear me or you can't
I
hear
can
me?
hear you, see you, and see everyone else, and still see Dr. DeFalco's slides. So,
Okay, good.
All right.
So question from some folks.
do we want to go through all of the operational piece, or do we want to stop section by section? And
I don't necessarily want to stop section by section, but I want to get this in before I forget it because I've lost my chat somehow. School supplies. So I assume teachers will have lists like they normally do, but supplies will not be shared between students, correct?
correct. Supplies will not be shared between students. Cubbies will not be used at the elementary levels. Students will not be hanging up their jackets together. Students will not be taking off their boots and putting them next to one another. Students will be at their desks. Coats and apparel will be kept at students' desks. And each level will also be developing protocols for accessing their materials. So that's something that each school principal and leadership team will be discussing and putting out as well for families. Because if we have students all leaning over into the center of aisles trying to access their backpacks at the same time, that's gonna compromise them maintaining the 6 feet of distance so that everyone can be safe. So again, supplies will not be shared. Parents will be given instructions on what supplies are appropriate for each level. And at each building level, potentially every grade level, there will be specific protocols that are shared with families as to how students should be entering the classroom, how they should be putting their materials away, and how they should be accessing them as needed. Does that answer that question, Jane?
Keep going.
Great.
And I got my chat back.
Excellent. So again, following all of the Environmental Protection Agency recommendations, the CDC recommendations, and the Department of Ed recommendations, we are going to be emphasizing hand washing. Hand washing is the most effective way to eliminate pathogens and combat this virus. So students will be encouraged to wash their hands as best as possible. When that's not available, we will have hand sanitizer accessible. I will speak further at another point about all of our PPE in general, but I can tell you that we have stocked up at least a 12-week supply of hand sanitizer. We have 160 gallons that have already been delivered. We have over 300 hand sanitizer dispensers that have been ordered, and there will be hand sanitizer dispensers and hand sanitizer in every classroom, office, and space where students will be. So at almost every interval, students will have the opportunity to sanitize their hands to make sure that they are keeping clean and stopping the spread of this virus. Let me go on. I said a little bit later about PPE. Since we're going to transition into transportation, I'll stick on a bit of the health and safety. With respect to the PPE that I referenced before, we have ordered, as I mentioned, masks. We have ordered hand sanitizer. We have ordered dispensers. We have ordered floor markings for all individuals to be able to appropriately space themselves 6 feet apart from one another in hallways and on the stairwells. We've ordered signs that will indicate that students and adults in the building should be keeping appropriate social distancing 6 feet apart. We have plexiglass barriers that have been ordered specifically for receptionists, for nurses' offices. We have face shields that have been ordered for specific faculty members. Essentially, any piece of protective wear that faculty or students or staff need, we have ordered already. And we may come across new things and new challenges. Again, we mention and emphasize flexibility. Something new may present itself, and there may be a new piece of protective equipment that presents itself as being useful, and we will purchase that as needed. We are going to make sure that we have everyone safe and protected as best as possible. To that point, we do not have a slide about it, but I wanted to discuss briefly our custodial cleaning and disinfecting action plan. I met today with our head custodians and Julie Wolford, the president of Unit C membership, and we had a big discussion about this plan. The plan is going to be posted. It'll be part of our return and recovery. Again, I mentioned we don't have it here. There are 3 main components to the cleaning aspect of the plan. The first is our routine evening cleaning and disinfecting. And that piece of the plan states that after students have left the building and staff have left the building, on a daily basis, night shift custodians will be cleaning and disinfecting every classroom, desk, chair, bathroom, hallway, and anywhere, office space, anywhere that students will be or adults will be in the building, almost to the extent of they'll take the day off and do a deep clean. We will be cleaning and disinfecting the buildings on a daily basis. We have purchased misting machines for each building that will spray disinfectant through the classrooms and cover desks, chairs, all of the equipment in the classrooms and hallways safely. And it is they will be using an approved disinfectant that if you check the EPA's List N, our disinfectant is on there. And the List N, for those of you at home, is a list that was put out with specific chemical ingredients that are known to combat SARS-CoV-2, that specific virus, which is the same iteration of a COVID-19 type virus. So these chemicals have been shown to be effective. The one that we're using has a very quick timeline for killing the virus. I believe it's just a matter of minutes. So what happens is at night, these misting machines are brought in and they're spraying the desks, they're spraying the rooms, and the mist is left on the desks to dry. So while it dries, it's sanitizing all of the surfaces that it's in contact with.
Matt, I'm getting a lot of bathroom questions. And will the kindergarten classrooms still have access to their bathrooms, and then bathrooms in general?
Correct, they will. That was the first major component of the custodial plan. Another component is high touch, and I'll get to bathrooms because that's actually the third component.
Oh, sorry.
The second component is high touch point zones. Custodial staff during the day will be moving through the building and regularly disinfecting high touch point zones. It actually, the plan states that there will be a minimum of 3, these touch point zones will be disinfected a minimum of 3 times a day, but more so regularly. As much as the custodians are able to disinfect these high touch point zones, they will be doing that. These touch point zones include, they won't be limited to, there's a little bit bigger list in the paperwork, but we're talking about indoor and inside and exterior handles of doors, the crash bars on doors that are in the hallways, the push pads on doors that are swinging doors, water fountain levers, faucet controls, urinal and toilet flushing controls, any of the cabinet handles that are used in office spaces for office staff, essentially, stairwells. Another piece of equipment that we've ordered for the district are these electrostatic micro mist sprayers. So while the classrooms will have these larger misters we fill them with gallons of disinfectant so that custodians can go room by room, mist the tops and the bottoms of the desk and hit the floors and all other materials. These electrostatic misting devices are being used to target more specifically handles and railings. The electrostatic nature of these devices, when the mist is sprayed, it encapsulates the material that it touches. So when you think about a handle, you want to make sure that you're getting both sides of that handle sprayed. So once the mist is applied directly at the handle, it envelops the handle itself. That's the nature of these sprayers. So this will allow our custodians to move quickly through the building and rapidly disinfect multiple sources of touch points. So they're going to be going through the buildings, spraying handles, push bars, water fountains, elevator buttons, and a whole slew of other high touch point areas. And these electrostatic misting machines will be extremely useful in doing this quickly. The goal is to have 2 of these machines in each of the buildings so that 2 day shift custodians will be moving through the building doing this at all times. The third component of the cleaning plan is daily, more regular cleaning spaces. So it includes bathrooms that will be cleaned at a minimum of every 2 hours. They'll be disinfected regularly. It includes classrooms. As you'll see later, our intention is to have lunch be in the classrooms. So custodians will be moving through the building, emptying trash bins and replacing liners during the lunch period. And at a minimum, we'll be replacing trash at least twice a day. That's outlined in the action plan. And isolation rooms. I was trying to think of the last one. I don't have that slide, so I'm just going from memory about this plan. The isolation rooms will be able to be cleaned on call. Custodians at any point will get calls if there are students that have potentially exhibited signs of COVID-19. They will make sure that students are in the isolation room connected to the nurses suite, and then those rooms will be heavily disinfected as needed. Hopefully, we're not going to have the isolation rooms used that frequently, but we are prepared to do as necessary.
Matt, talk before you go on to transportation, talk a tiny bit about ventilation and those machines you bought for the rooms that don't have windows.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Actually, as part of the cleaning plan, HVAC is addressed. We are doing an analysis of all of our HVAC systems prior to the beginning of the school year. We are ensuring that all of the filters that are in our HVAC systems are of MERV 13 quality. I don't have that plan in front of me. Essentially, the MERV rating of a filter, the higher the MERV rating, the finer the particle that it will filter. So a MERV 13 filter is capable of filtering spores and some virus materials. That's how fine the particulate is that the MERV 13 filters will clean out of the airflow. So it's known to remove mold spores and really fine particles, potentially up to virus particles.
I have a quick question with that to
Sure.
piggyback. Can I just ask real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So will they be opening windows to get the air moving, but not using fans? Is that correct?
We have not discussed or put into a formal plan the use of fans.
Okay.
We will be opening windows in every room possible for the largest extent of time possible.
Okay.
That will be probably into the depths of winter. So we will, depending on the season, encourage families regularly to have their students dress appropriately. That may also combat the issue of coats on chairs. If we need to keep the windows open, they may be keeping their coats on, quite frankly. I understand that this may sound a bit alarming. Accommodations will be made. There is heat in the building. That being said, we are going to be monitoring all of the circumstances and situations as we progress through this timeline of being in school, and we'll be making changes to the recommendations. As winter months approach, we may have to close some of the windows, and we may have some other recommendations, or we may decide that it's better to keep the windows open and have kids dress more, in their coats. But those will be conversations that occur as we're moving forward. Right now, we're focusing on those initial weeks of school. Windows will be open. All of our air handling systems and ventilation systems will be assessed. They will be maintained at a proper ratio for exhausting air from the rooms while fresh air is coming in through the windows. Jane mentioned and asked me to speak to the air purifiers that we have. For any space that has a lack of airflow, we are putting air purifiers into those classrooms. There are a few classrooms in the high school that are interior classrooms. We're not sure that those classrooms are going to be used for students. Again, some of these decisions will depend on the numbers that we get back from the surveys so that we can really look at the specifics. But there will be air purifiers available, and if more are needed, we will purchase them. The air purifiers are also being used in the nursing suite and in the isolation rooms. These air purifiers, they will create a negative pressure environment inside the isolation rooms and inside the nursing suites that will limit the amount of viral load that leaves those office spaces when the doors are. So basically, because we have those viral air filtration systems in the nurse's office, they're sucking in air and filtering the viral particulate out of the air so that when the doors are opened, the concentration of viral load is going to be lower inside the room than it is outside. And the concentration is going to be lower, and it's going to be maintained at a lower concentration so that we're basically going to be trying to move all of the viral particulate out of the nurse's office, out of the isolation room, and filter it. Does that answer the question regarding the air purifiers, Jane?
Yes, it does. And as far as the fans, fans are not recommended. Anything that blows the air around is not recommended, but that will have to be in our final plan for final decision.
Yeah, that was my concern. I mean, I know I teach elementary, and when they told me no fans, I almost had a heart attack because it's 95 degrees and you have as many fans as you can get. But in this particular situation, safety is the first priority. And when a virus runs horizontally, you really don't want a fan.
There you go.
So I just wanted to make sure that that was somewhere, in our policy that we've been creating. Thank you.
And I can also speak to the air flow through the rooms. While we won't be using fans, it is important again to make sure that we're getting that fresh air in. And we actually had conversations with the building inspectors that are coming through our buildings to make sure that they're up to code. And one of the things they emphasized with our custodians is that they will be checking all of the exhausts for each of the rooms. So they literally will be coming up, and where air is supposed to be leaving, they'll be taking tissue paper or toilet paper, thickness material. They'll be holding it up, and they'll be ensuring that it gets sucked up into the ventilation system for the exhaust. I've also given very specific directions to our custodial staff after today's meeting that all of the representatives from our ventilation HVAC systems are going to be coming into our buildings to ensure that all of the settings are appropriate for the right mixture of fresh air and circulating air. So we are really on top of that, and we want to make sure that everyone, our families and our faculty, know that that is a priority for us to make sure that that air quality is as good as it can be.
And to somebody's point, and Matt, the isolation rooms are exactly that, isolation rooms. They're not part of the nurses' rooms or part of they are separate,
Correct. They are
isolated.
separate rooms located adjacent to the nurses' suite.
Yeah, adjacent, but not in the nurses'
They are
station.
not in the nurses' suite.
Yep. Okay.
They are separated.
Closable rooms.
They have doors that can be closed,
Yeah.
and the nurse will then be able to enter the room, check on the students. Students will be tended to, but they will be clearly separated from the regular population or anyone that happens to be in the nurse's office.
And I just want to point out real quick that every building is going to have tents. So on those 95-degree days that Wendy's talking about, that would probably be a good option as well.
That is true. I'll move on to transportation. So again, Dr. DeFalco has mentioned that we'll be sending out a survey tomorrow. This survey is really important with respect to transportation in the district. We are trying to get an accurate assessment of those families that need transportation. And I will emphasize this. If families are able to transport their own students, that will be an excellent option. That's generally the safest way. You are bringing them. The buses do have cleaning protocols. I want to assure everyone that they will be as safe as they can be. However, as Jane mentioned earlier, all of these steps are to mitigate exposure to potential virus load. So with respect to our transportation, I've spoken to Neil Telstone, who oversees our transportation, and we've discussed cleansing procedures for the buses. They too will be disinfected on a regular basis. Students will be required to wear masks when they enter the buses. Students will be separated by 6 feet. That measure is approximately the distance. Students will be scattered in a zigzag pattern on the seats so that there is a seat between everyone in one aisle, and they're sitting diagonally across from one another. I don't have a visual with me right now, but there are visuals that are connected to our plan. So if someone is in the first row in the aisle to the left, there won't be someone in the first row in the aisle to the right. They'll be in the second row. And then there won't be anyone in the second row in the aisle to the left. They'll be in the third row, so on and so forth. So you'll have a diagonal pattern of students. They'll be sitting one to a seat unless they are siblings. That's the guidance that we've received from the state at this point. Even if there are siblings, we're still going to limit that seating to 2 siblings in one seat, so that we don't have anyone pushing over into the aisle and breaking that distance barrier from the other students across the aisle. So again, 1 person per seat. There'll be alternating seats, and if there are siblings, 2 individuals can sit together. Everyone will be wearing a mask on the bus. Drivers will be wearing a mask on the bus. Windows will be open on the buses. And we will be figuring out how many trips each route needs to make. So that's why, again, we will be clearly limiting the space on the buses, and that will lead us to have to make multiple trips with the buses. And that's, again, depending on the final numbers, we'll take that information and figure out which routes have to be run multiple times and how many times each route has to be run. And then we will figure out what the staggering is going to be. Each of the building principals is developing an entry and dismissal plan. This is going to include points of bus drop-off and pickup and points of parent drop-off and pickup. The plans will be different and will be specific to the buildings. I don't have that information with me now, but as you could imagine, each of the buildings have a different number of exits and entry points, and their layout is different for where cars and or buses can access the building. They will be developing these plans with the idea of maximizing the use of all of the points that they can, so that we're having a very limited amount of students coming in at the same place or leaving through the same place. And that is potentially going to cut into some time. But as you will see in our plan, part of that is the Department of Education has lowered some restrictions on the time on learning to accommodate for these types of arrangements that need to be made. I wanted to speak to the transportation as it applies to the changes that Dr. DeFalco referenced. It's not in the transportation slides, but one of the things that we are very aware will have an impact on students' decision of whether or not they support this idea of having grades K through 1 at MES and 2 through 5 at the complex is the factor of transportation. So Dr. DeFalco and I have already personally been on the buses and taken a trip through the towns and tried to determine with Neil Telstone the absolute farthest point that stops would be from each of the buildings in the opposite town.
On the school bus. I just want to make sure people know we did it on the school bus intentionally, so we would get a sense of.
Yep, absolutely.
The literal routes.
We rode the school buses to check the streets and to check the time it took for the actual buses to maneuver through the routes. And what we came across is that the very farthest points that we experienced in our trips, calculating entry time and or exiting time from the bus, the largest distances or largest times that we experienced were currently, and again, we have not made any modifications to these routes. The largest times were between 40 and 43 minutes. So for the furthest distance in Blackstone to get to go through a bus route and get to Millville, it was approximately 40 minutes. For the furthest distance from Millville to get to go through an entire bus route to get to Blackstone, it was approximately 43 minutes. Currently, our largest, and this was only 2 routes. I want to make this very clear. This is a very limited number of routes. Right now, our largest routes take between 35 and 40 minutes for pickup and drop off. With this run, making these changes to K through 1 being at MES and 2 through 5 being at the complex, currently, without adjusting any of these routes, our largest routes were between 40 and 43 minutes. So adding somewhere between 5 and 8 minutes to the entire duration of the bus ride, which is relatively insignificant when we're looking at maximizing the space for students to be learning on a regular basis. That being said, these are not permanent routes. So Dr. DeFalco and I have already had conversations about how we could potentially lessen the length of time for these routes as well. So our goal is to, even if we do have routes going out, they shouldn't be more than a maximum of 35 to 40 minutes. So that will still be in alignment with what our current largest routes are. And again, that would only be about 1 or 2 routes, possibly 1 route for each of the buildings.
Matt, can I just jump into that very quickly so folks at home know, in particular our Blackstone families, we went to the furthest point on the lake, and to Millville Elementary School. That was one route. The other route was the furthest point out on Rathbun Street, over near the park area. And then we went to the other side of town in Millville, to the JFK AFM complex. I think it was the upper corner of Chestnut.
It was.
That was the upper corner of Chestnut to the complex. So just to give everyone a sense of exactly where we were, and in looking at the actual duration and how it, what it feels like on the bus. We wanted to ride the exact routes the kids would go. So,
It was Chestnut Alfonso Way, so
Yep.
it was that distance.
but just if anyone at home, is wondering where exactly we were, it was those neighborhoods to the school and back to get a sense.
And thank you for that, Jason. I apologize
Yeah.
for not referencing the specific sites.
No, that's okay.
Back to the actual slides. So you can see parent drop off and pickup is going to be organized by building. Principals will be designing traffic patterns that maximize the use of the space that each of the buildings have. We are also encouraging students to walk or ride their bikes to school. Not only is this helpful for staying away from potential students that might be transmitting the virus, but it's also great exercise and it's really good to be outdoors and get some fresh air just in general. So we really want to encourage that physical activity and having students walk or bike ride. We're going to be looking into potentially setting up walking school buses, but that hasn't been finalized yet. So we haven't put those plans into a final slide presentation.
Matt, can I just respond to the bike rides? Is it possible to have, this is Remka, just come up with a plan for bike riding? I know my kids bike ride a lot and this would be an opportunity for them to bike to school. However, with the different traffic flows that are going to continue, it might be problematic. But I think if there is a route of some sort to go through the fields or something, if we're going to encourage bike riding and walking, we really need to have some type of plan for them, just because there's no sidewalks on certain sides of the complex. And also, I guess you could even say that for the middle school as well, because that's quite a hike and there's no sidewalks there either. So just reviewing that safety procedure for those upper elements.
Matt, can I speak to that? Oh,
I was going to say that you are 100% correct. And as part of that walking school bus process, we are going to be working with the resource officers. We're hoping to be working with the resource officers and identifying the safest routes to walk to school and to ride bikes to school, and what those paths would be and what the traffic patterns would be. I apologize, Jason, if that's what you were.
Oh, no, that's perfect. I was just going to weigh in on that and just let folks at home know that we're actually going to be working with them to map out the routes as you were expressing.
Yeah. So it's an excellent point, Wendy, and we want to make sure that the students are safe in every respect of the term. I mean,
Yeah, and I wonder, they have had many grants that put out bike helmets. So just as like an advertisement of biking, you could even team up with the local police and see if they have that grant going. I know Millville did. Millville had car seats and helmets, and it just might be something worthwhile, especially during the October and September months.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Thanks.
Thank you. Food service. So I have been working with Maureen Gonzalez, our food service director, and we have put together this initial proposal for a plan. I want to stress that the plan that we are presenting is trying to, as best as possible, limit contact. That includes contact between students and cafeteria workers, and contact with food materials, and contact with money. So one of the first things that we are doing is we are making sure that all of our students have their ID cards with a barcode of their lunch code on there, which will be scannable. So as students are paying for meals or just registering for free or reduced meals, all they will need to do is scan their barcode. Currently, we have not received a waiver for any type of universal feeding. If that moves forward and the federal government approves that waiver, which the state has put in, we may not even need to scan barcodes. I'm not sure what the extent will be with respect to the tracking of the meals, but we are making sure that in the event that these waivers don't go through, we have a scannable barcode. Students won't be touching they won't be touching pin pads, and they will be as low as possible exchanging money. We, again, will say if it is absolutely necessary for cafeteria workers to take cash from students, they will be able to do so, but they will have gloves, and we will be trying to limit that as best as possible and practice all safety precautions. Food is going to be prepared. I'm sorry. With respect to the overall process, students will be eating in their classrooms. And as such, one of the things we're going to do is ask the public to make sure they're aware of foods that they're sending in. Certainly, we're asking that peanuts and peanut products not be sent in. Those are very clear foods that have life-threatening allergies associated with them. There will also be other allergies that may be present in specific classes. And what we'll be doing is asking teachers to, families will identify their individual student allergies that may present a problem. And teachers in those homerooms or classes where students are eating will be able to share that information with the students that will be eating in that classroom and their families, so that they know not to bring those foods in. With respect to our full in-person process, grades K through 5, students are going to take, the teachers are going to take student orders in the morning. Staff will escort the students to the cafeteria by homeroom to get a grab-and-go style meal. All of our meals will be prepackaged in either clamshells, containers, or bags. There won't be selecting items from a line. Everything will be packaged. That's why it's important that the students know what they're going to be ordering in advance that morning, so that the cafeteria staff can make the appropriate meals and package them accordingly. Students will pick up their meals from the cafeteria, and they will return to their classrooms, where they will be 6 feet apart. While they're 6 feet apart, they can remove their masks, they can eat their meals, they can put their masks back on, they'll be disposing of their trash, they'll have hand sanitizer and cleaning materials available for them, and that will be the general process. Custodians will come and remove the trash from the classrooms, and they'll replace the liners in the trash cans, and class will resume when it's supposed to naturally resume, and that will be the lunch period. One of the hopes is that transition to the cafeteria and back will provide the students some mobility, since there won't be recess during these lunch periods. Hopefully they can get up, walk to the cafeteria, walk back, and that's a bit of exercise that they'll be getting during the day. Again, in addition to some of those at their seat exercises that Dr. DeFalco mentioned. The only difference between the upper grade levels and the elementary grade levels, for middle and high school students, they will have some possible a la carte items that are going to be made available. That might be a Snapple beverage or some specific packaged product like cookies or something of that nature. If those are available, they will be behind the counter with the cafeteria workers, and the cafeteria workers will distribute those items to the students so that they can put them in their package and move along. Students will not be taking things off of stands, and they will not be touching anything at the cafeteria line. With respect to the hybrid model, those students, when they're physically present, who are physically present, will follow the same protocols as the in-person. Students that are attending a satellite learning center will have food delivered to them at the Boys and Girls Club or at the high school in an auditorium or in a gymnasium in their smaller groups. Those meals will be prepackaged and they will be brought to those locations. Similarly, while students are in a remote learning pattern, if they're not at the satellite center, they will have a delivery location identified, and we will be delivering meals on a daily basis. That differs slightly from the process that we're following now, where we've prepared three meals, breakfast and lunch, and brought the package for a number of days. We are not going to be doing that. We're going to be making meals the day of, they'll be brought to the one delivery site, potentially somewhere around the middle school, or possibly one site at each of the towns. That still hasn't been fully determined. And that will be a pickup for those students that are remote during that day. Full remote.
Hold on. First of all, if I've missed people's questions, I apologize. I am moving as best I can, and I think I've caught everybody. But there have been questions about, lunch. It's been senior privilege. They can eat out in the courtyard. Has that been considered? And I want to go to the recess. The saying of no recess is a state guideline, correct?
That is a recommendation.
Correct. Okay.
It is very difficult to keep students socially distanced appropriately if we're letting them out for quote unquote recess.
Yeah, Matt,
because
it doesn't
a lot
mean
of Simon says.
it doesn't mean that we can't get the kids outside for like a mask break, stretch breaks, moving around. I don't want parents to think that, that kids will not. As a matter of fact, we're going to encourage those, small groups to go out. Like we, had mentioned, we'll have tents that, teachers can use. But, there's no reason that children can't go outside and take a mask break and get some fresh air. It's just they won't be climbing all over the jungle gyms and the swing sets and all those other things, which.
Right. In theory, all of the classes are essentially encased in the classrooms. So while they're eating lunch, they're isolated. If we were to have recess, like Dr. DeFalco was saying, individual classes will be taking mask breaks and having opportunities to get outside. But if we were to have quote unquote recess, all of those students and all of those classes would need to be outside at the same time. And that would really present a situation where it becomes a little less easy to control, so to speak. Definitely less easy. Full remote, if we are in a situation where we do end up going back into a full remote learning environment, then we will be conducting our food services as we have since the spring. We will identify specific delivery areas, and we will transport food to those delivery areas and give that to the students. This slide originally said for children aged 0 to 21. We removed that from this slide because, again, that universal waiver has not been approved at the federal level. However, I do want to make all families aware that if this is the case and that waiver is approved, then all children aged 0 to 21, whether they even live in this community or not, will be eligible to get food from our delivery sites. And that is the conclusion of our food services.
Jane, do you think we could just take some questions for safety from the committee, or are we going to keep going to the end and wait for questions?
This is the end of the.
Yeah, this is the questions for Matt. Yep, these are, so now's your chance. Yep, go ahead, Wendy.
Okay, I have a few. One of them, you talked about markers with a 6 foot distance. Is there going to be markers in the classrooms?
That's a great question. There will be. So
okay.
We don't have a specific system yet, but we've discussed that with the custodial staff, and we are going to be putting markers on the floor where desks and chairs are. I'm not sure if it'll be at like the front right leg of each piece of furniture, but there will be markers put down so that custodians can quickly and effectively reposition furniture if they are to shift out of space, across the 6 foot distance. Similarly, students themselves can see the markers to self-maintain that distance.
Right. I just know being in a classroom, they push desks all day long and they can get super close without even realizing how close they are. So I wanted to make sure that fell into the classroom as well.
Absolutely.
The other question I had is, you mentioned about when you were talking about spraying, using the spray to sanitize everything. You mentioned the water fountains. The water fountains are going to be closed, right? Or are we keeping those open?
So The water, there will be, I said water fountains, so I apologize. There will be in 3 of our 4 buildings, there will be water bottling stations.
Oh, okay.
And those water bottling stations will have push button controls on them so that no one will actually be coming into contact with the dispenser itself. And again, those push buttons are among the high touch frequency disinfecting that the custodians will be doing during the day. Those bottling stations have not been installed yet. They're going to be installed during the summer as part of the Safe Water Initiative grant that we were awarded. That was a $33,000 grant, and it's covering 11 bottling stations that are going.
Awesome.
To the
That's
district.
great.
And the bottling
Matt,
stations have filtration systems in them as well.
There's a button. It's not, the ones we have in my school, you put the bottle under and it comes
Sensor.
under. There's no touching anything. Yeah, like ultra.
To be honest, I am not 100% sure which piece of
That's what,
we've gotten.
Okay.
The distributor that we're working with, I haven't seen the specifics yet.
I'm sure those kindergartners will find a way to touch those anyway. So as long as we're sanitizing those things.
Sanitizing every piece of it.
Okay. I think I have just one more question and then I have a comment. Throwing away of the masks and any of the PPE, is there trash cans that are designated for specific PPE removals?
There will be
Okay.
specific trash cans for PPE. Yes.
Okay.
I
'Cause
don't know
can-
if those will be, we haven't decided whether or not those will be in every classroom or if those will be in more central locations. So that's a consideration as to whether or not we want the disposed PPE in the classrooms. So that's something that we're still trying to finalize.
Okay, I just think they need to be somewhere because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of kids that are going to be coming with disposable masks and a couple extra. And, you know, because the virus can stay in certain places, I just think it would be beneficial to have that somewhere.
Absolutely.
That's, you know, near the students.
I really like that idea. I just want to say, and maybe like a nice bright red trash can for that. So everyone knows what the difference is.
Yeah.
So-
Biohazard,
Biohazard, yes.
biohazard trash.
So Jason and Matt, one of the things that keeps popping up is this concept of recess. And I understood that it was something that was discouraged. But someone just wrote in the latest guidelines on July 27th, said that recess is allowed without masks if 6-foot distance is maintained, which we know that's hard to do, and play equipment is open. Since this is a preliminary plan,
Yeah,
would
we'll
one
check
of those working groups have the ability to look at the July 27th guidelines and take another look at them?
You know, I just read those again. As a matter of fact, I read them again this morning, so I might have missed it. We're happy to look at it again.
Me too. I'm like, I didn't, but it's, you know, I don't know. So
We can-
yes, we, to the answer people, yes, we will. We are continuing to look at a lot of this.
And I just have two just comments that I'd like to make. One is I'm concerned about the amount that has to get done with, is there still one janitor at night in each building?
There are 2 janitors in the evening.
Okay.
And there will be, as Dr. DeFalco mentioned, I did have conversation with the custodians today, as I referenced, the head custodians. Typically, there have been 1 day shift custodian in each of the buildings. That is going to need to be changed. The disinfecting that needs to happen during the course of the day can only happen if we add additional custodial staff to the buildings for the day shift and potentially for the evening shift. But Dr. DeFalco and I have discussed that those are some of the additional staffing positions that we will be posting for, in addition to the support staff for the remote learning satellite centers.
Okay, because you know, when you look at the hierarchy, you know, you go safety, then you go academics, and you know, and safety is just, it's a must. And the amount of spraying and cleaning and disinfecting, on top of the work that they're doing now. I just think it's important to have, you know, that one person that is his sole job is to disinfect and clean and sanitize so that it's routine, you know who's doing it, and it's consistent. So, you know, that was a concern. And the other concern I had was the number of nurses that we have. And the only reason I say that is I can only imagine the amount of kids that are going to be going to the nurse when they sneeze, when they cough, I mean, you're going to be, the amount of students that are going to the nurses is going to be a concern. And not to say they have anything, but just out of fear, which is a fair statement to say. So between the amount that is going into the nurses station and then coming in and out of possibly that isolation room, I worry that there needs to be another body in the room or with the nurse to support the nurse, just because of the sheer number of things that are going to be happening at that station. So I just wanted to share those two things that I was concerned about.
Do you mind if I speak to the nursing piece, Matt, just quickly?
Yeah, please. After, I would like to speak to the custodial piece as well, though.
Sure. Yeah, I think on the nursing front, we couldn't agree with you more. You know, and just the provisions and protocols that are put in place, if there's even a suspected case, you know, it's pretty significant in terms of the process we have to go through. So, you know, the school committee will see after this, there's still business to do after our discussion on reopening. And part of that is looking at a temporary lead nurse. And part of his or her role will be to assist and support in each of the different buildings. And so if there happens to be, you know, a large influx of something going on at, you know, Millville Elementary or the complex, that individual will be able to go and attend and help and support those nurses and help to coordinate services, communicate with families, the Board of Health, communicate with the leadership team. So we are looking to do that utilizing the grant that we had mentioned earlier. So we are looking to add that additional support, not just for coordination, but for direct patient care.
Yeah, I'm thinking more along the lines of somebody in the weeds consistently, not you know, just moving, but somebody consistently with the nurses that we have. Just like I said, the share numbers is just I don't want them to be burnt out. And I speak this. I guess I speak the same for the teachers as well. I mean, I should have said this earlier, but I want to make sure that we have something for the teachers as well to support them. Because I'm sure they're just as anxious as all those students that are going to be coming in. And, you know, an anxious teacher makes an anxious student. So if there's a check-in point or somebody that's checking on the social emotional needs of the teachers as well, that would be really something to look at as well, just because, you know, they feel how we feel. So as a teacher, so I just wanted to make a point that, you know, their health is just as important as you know, the kids in front of us.
Yeah,
That's it.
Yeah, I also couldn't agree more. The point that I wanted to make regarding the custodial piece, you are spot on with respect to our safety being number one. And the two things that we're looking at when we were trying to assess how to maintain this is the manpower and also the equipment. Mm-hmm. So that factors in also with respect to the people. So we use those misting machines and tested them in the classrooms. Mm-hmm. And one of those machines can fully cover an entire classroom, the desks, the chairs, everything in there within a matter of about 2 minutes. So with those capabilities, that will allow the custodians to move quickly. And similarly, the handheld electrostatic misting machines, it's a blast. They can cover their little handheld devices that actually cover up to 20,000 square feet in each fill of their tank. And if you're thinking about just railings and handles and that surface area, 20,000 square feet is pretty significant number of handles and railings in each canister. So they're not even stopping to refill that frequently. They're on the move, they're disinfecting, they're making sure that all of these spaces are taken care of. Mm-hmm. And they will have.
Jason, can you speak to where we're getting the money to do all of this?
Yeah. So there are two things. There's actually two funding streams. The first, we're able to do some of the work through our CARES Act money, which was about $140,000. We're able to free up some money in FY21 to be able to do some of the summer programming work and some of the things we've already put in place to help us be able to reopen. The larger funding stream is coming through COVID relief fund that the governor released through the Department of Education, and each school system has the opportunity to apply for and will be awarded. It's not a competitive grant. There's an amount allocated for every system at $225 per student. So for us, it's about $380,000. There are some pretty tight provisions on that, in that the money needs to be spent by December 2020 and has to be used for startup costs in order to safely get kids back in school. So a lot of the things that we're talking about, from looking at cleaning air ducts or putting in additional programming and supports in our classrooms or Boys and Girls Club, a lot of that is coming from our $380,000 that startup grant to get school reopened. But again, a big thank you to both the town of Blackstone and Millville, because both communities have been very supportive about utilizing some of their town's CARES Act money to help us fund some of the tutors that we'll have at the Boys and Girls Club. So it really has been a community effort and money that's coming through funding streams through grants that we're going after.
Okay, and then all of this spraying, and so maybe this is a question for Jill. All of this spraying and all of this cleaning and all of this disinfectant, and we know that it's on the EPA N policy, so it's not supposed to be detrimental and it's been deemed safe, but what about kids with asthma? I don't know, Jill, if you can answer that or not.
I don't know if I think the thing is, it's not like when it's being cleaned, I know some of the protocols say it should be cleaned when students aren't actually in the area. And Matt, you would know more about the cleaning that we're using. It's not something that will continue to stay in the air for children to breathe in, correct?
Oh, yeah, correct. Not at all. And again, that's also why the major disinfecting of the rooms will occur in the times when students and staff are not present in the building. The disinfectant of specific handles and railings and touch items are going to be the ones that more predominantly are done through the course of the day. And that, again, the use of the electrostatic sprayer actually makes the mist adhere to the surface that you're spraying, so it doesn't remain just drifting around in the air. It's not necessarily a cloud of droplets. It's a fine mist, and it just attaches to the surface, and that disinfects it. So there should be very limited issues with students inhaling any type of disinfectant. And again, as you mentioned, these disinfectants are considered safe by the EPA. Not to sit and inhale, but to use in the buildings. So there will be very little issue with that.
But Jane, I can follow up as well with the school nurses. Do you know what I mean? Or whoever's also coming on board as our kind of like head nurse. It's a great question. Like I said, I don't believe there's a lot, like Matt said, a lot of things to inhale, but it's still something I can absolutely follow up on.
And again, as our new motto really has become, if we have to pivot, we pivot. So we may find that a student has an allergy to something that we are using in a classroom. And if that is the case, then we're going to make sure that we quickly and efficiently change what it is that we're using to keep that student and the rest of the students safe. Similarly, if there's a student with asthma issues and a certain product can't be used, we will make sure that we find the right product and get it so that it can be used.
Any other school committee members?
Tammy is raising her hand.
Oh, go ahead. You guys have to jump in because again, I only see 4 people.
Sorry, no, I was trying, as we were talking, I was trying to look up the whatever that guidance on July 27th regarding recess was. So I lost track of where my meeting click was. Okay. Way back when we talked about as a safety precaution, doing block scheduling at the high school or considering that. Are we also considering some professional development if we make that change, Jason? Because
You
block
have to.
scheduling is,
Yeah, otherwise you get a
unique-
45-minute lesson in a 90-minute block. I know.
torture can come in the form of block scheduling if teachers are not trained
Agreed.
to mix it up there. So,
Yeah, it's not, we shared it as a potential option, just one way to mitigate, to mitigate the movement. But you're right, there's a lot that has to go into that.
okay, that was something, you definitely need some training there if they haven't done it before.
Yeah.
Transitioning and staggering times, I heard Matt say. I just want to make sure that we're thinking about, it's very hard to do that at the high school level, in that you might transition half of the people, but they need to get to the classes that the other half are in. And then you're going to cross at the doorway versus if you have directionals in the hallway. So just something to consider when I heard the staggering leaving of classes at the high school level. That was something we talked about a lot in the task force in Cumberland.
To your point, Tammy, not to cut you off, but we also, in our smaller groups, we identified that different buildings have different limitations on how their transitions can occur. And it is possible, like the middle school is identified, they may develop one-way hallways. So that's, speaking to your point, the staggering may be just a few minutes, for certain groups of students to get in. And then, the class may start a little bit later while some students are working on, a do now or something of that nature. But again, those protocols are being worked out at the building level to try to accommodate for all of their specific, limitations.
Okay. And Jane, I think you answered a question regarding fans, because that was up in the air at some point. They are not recommended. Is that true?
They are not. Yep.
Whew. Okay. I heard something about face shield, the clear mask for certain teachers working with specific students that may be helpful.
Yes.
Is that instead of a mask?
No, that's in addition to a face mask. They would have clear shields. So that would be predominantly for preschool teachers or teachers working with students with more severe needs that may
Okay.
come in contact with bodily fluids.
I wanted to clarify that for the folks, because when I first heard that a week and a half ago in another conversation, I thought it was for students who maybe have hearing loss or speech language issues where reading lips may be helpful, but it is to protect eyes and face from liquids.
So,
Getting those two.
So we mentioned in the mask section, we are purchasing face masks that do have clear windows for those students that have hearing impairments or for younger students learning phonemes. Also, Jill and I had discussed, although in general, a face mask is additional to, a face shield will be in addition to a face mask, because they certainly don't do the same thing. There may be certain students that, because of disabilities or medical issues, can't wear a face mask. And then the face shield may be a potential alternative, not completely accomplishing the same, but being helpful in that nature.
But the face shield would protect the teacher more in some of those situations.
Right. Well, the face masks, again, our face masks that we wear protect everyone else from us for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And then for those students with disabilities or medical conditions, again, it's not the primary option, but we may order them specifically for kids that can't wear masks just to help with it.
Okay.
And Tammy, we have, of course, in our specialized programs, we have students that at times require hand over hand assistance in the bathroom. So maintaining social, that 6 feet is not possible. So there are additional protocols that are recommended that we'll be putting in place. Having a face shield, gloves, like for example, a monitor on the bus will be wearing gloves at all times because they'll be, you know what I mean, clipping some of our little ones in. But same with our kids in the classroom, we have to put additional safety protocols in place, including those face shields, gloves, maybe an extra set of making sure staff and, some students have extra set of clothing. Because again, we have students that we assist in the classroom, but we also assist, in the bathroom.
Right. And so I just want to add, Jill, in our district at our recent meeting, we talked about those teachers in those specialized programs potentially wearing scrubs so that they can take them off before they go home and have sort of a layer underneath. So just as another thing, or maybe even we're thinking about getting like hospital gowny type things for kids who need toileting help. Just to add a layer of protection between for teachers.
Yeah, and actually it was funny, my preschool teachers and I just had that conversation, and one of them said, is it okay if I wear scrubs to school? You know what I mean? As an extra layer. Absolutely. I will tell you that the disposable aren't the best recommendation to have just on hand quickly, just because of the fact that we have some students who sometimes will be dysregulated, and those really aren't safe during those times. So we are having those discussions about an extra smock or the extra set of clothing, because accidents will happen. It could happen if a student gets sick in the classroom, or if we're helping a kid in the bathroom. So we are having those conversations as well.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
The nurses also, Tammy, we actually just got a request from Karen Young, who's been trying to facilitate requests from all of the nurses in the district. She just asked, they're actually looking into using disposable ponchos. So they asked for an order of a tremendous amount of disposable ponchos that they can be wearing when they're working with some of the kids.
I almost think like you buy a small amount of each and figure out what works best, so you don't end up with 400,000 ponchos and you realize, to Jill's point, that they cause a different safety issue.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's just a matter of how much supply you can get once you make your choice. But recess is, I would like to see what the guideline is. And like I said, I was trying to look quickly as we were speaking about that.
Tammy, let me interrupt you for a minute. Tara found something, but Tara, I'm trying to do two things and I'm not finding what you tried to send. So if you saw it, can you read it or refer to it?
Well, actually, Peter Olson actually sent the link in the chat on live stream, so I just copied it, and I'll email it to the school committee so you guys can all look at it.
Well, but it's a very large thing. Did you find the recess?
Yeah, it's a whole
part?
article. I don't have it open.
An article from the state or an article from someone who has another opinion?
It's shared from Boston.com, but I believe it said it's the guideline, I believe.
Because I couldn't see anything dated.
We have to look more closely at it.
Okay.
It discussed whether you need to have them wear masks at recess, and if they can keep 6 feet away from each other, you can go mask free. You can opt mask free, but if they're going to be within 3 feet, they need to wear their masks, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess oh, sorry, Tara, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you're looking at something. If you have something to help clarify this.
I'm scanning it quickly.
Okay. I'll give you a minute and I'll ask a different question while you do that, okay?
All right.
So I guess my question is, I know that we have to follow the guidelines of DESE in this area of recess. However, when I think about K through 2, the proposal may be that they're at Millville Elementary. They're going to be split into one class is going to be split into 2 groups.
Yes.
So potentially that could be only 10 kids.
Yes, it could be less depending.
So
on
if you do, it will take work and it will take time scheduling such a thing for Christina and her folks over there, but potentially we have a large enough area of field there. Take if you don't want to deal with the playground equipment and figuring out how to sanitize that. At least allow, I mean, those 10 kids, allow them individual jump rope, something. I can't imagine that they're going to stay in a classroom for 6 hours a day with no room for a little bit of play.
Sure.
So I hope we can figure something out there.
Yeah.
So in Paris, they gave every kid a hula hoop, and then the hula hoop was assigned to the kid, and you couldn't get within one hula hoop to the next hula hoop.
Whatever it takes, Jane, I think we need to be creative in the area of getting
Play.
these guys outside, at least being able to chat it up with hula hoop distance, and get some sunlight.
Yeah,
And I
Uh-oh.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Sarah.
I think we just need to go back to what Jane said at the beginning about a new normal. We're going to have to put a greater emphasis on the social emotional piece, just within the confines of safe spacing. It's going to be different, but we aren't going to create an environment of, like a dystopian school experience. We're going to be really emphasizing how to make this a good experience, but a safe one. So just be mindful of that. I know it can be overwhelming, like all of these restrictions, but we're going to be looking for what we can do. So just be mindful of that.
Jane, can I just piggyback? I want to mention something that I think it kind of fits to a bit about what Sarah is talking about. This notion of not having a dystopian society. I think it's a good way to listen. I feel
like the evil dictator having done the operational presentation.
Yeah, no, but I feel like this might be a good entry point, in particular for those who are listening, saying, yeah, this is great. There's a lot of plans, a lot of detail. We still have a bunch of things to tease out. There's a lot of questions to be answered. But what happens if, right? So, earlier, Wendy mentioned, kids coming down to the nurse's office and a lot of colds and sniffles and coughs. And she's right. I mean, on a good day, the nurse's office is really crowded, right? And so when we start thinking about, to Matt's point, well, when the weather gets colder and the heat kicks on and maybe we have to start closing some windows and, what happens? And so I just want to share with folks that are still tuning in, we have 9 very specific protocols in place for what do we do if scenario pops up? For instance, what do we do if a student or staff tests positive for COVID-19? We have a protocol for that. That was devised by the CDC and shared out through the Department of Education. We have a very specific protocol. What do we do if there is close contact of a student or staff that tested positive? So what do we do for the kids around those individuals? How do we handle if a kid is symptomatic on the bus? What do we do if a student is symptomatic at school? How do we manage if a staff is symptomatic at home or at school? What do we do if there is a presence of multiple cases in a school or a district? How do we handle a presence of a significant number of new cases in a municipality? So one of our towns, right? Blackstone or Millville has an outbreak. What do we do? What do we do if there's a statewide regression and we see a big uptick in cases? So, I want to I'm certainly not trying to worry folks. Actually, it's meant to be the opposite. We actually have very specific and targeted protocols. To Sarah's point, right? It's not going to be a perfect scenario. And what if these things bubble up? And inevitably they might. And so how do we manage those? And so I certainly don't want to take the time to read all of the protocols, but what you will see in our final released plan is we will have a fairly significant appendix, and all of the protocols for all of those scenarios, we will make sure they're attached so that families can read them. If you want to read them in advance, they're on the Department of Ed's website. They were released on July 17th. So as you know, we're mentioning, this update was in the July 27th update. This was referenced in the July 17th update from the Department of Education. If it's helpful, you can check it out. If you want to look at it in advance, you can just send me an email. I'll scan it and send it to you if you can't find it, or send you the link. But it will be connected to our plans. So hopefully that'll put a little bit of folks at ease to know that if one of these situations occurs, we have a medically devised protocol straight from the CDC on how to manage this. Thanks for that, Jane. I just wanted to make sure to get that in.
Thank you.
And Jane, can I just clarify for people listening, the guidelines that came out for specialized courses, I think they called it band and chorus and phys ed. In that piece of guideline, it clearly says nothing can be shared. So it says in phys ed that you need to do things that are individual, that kind of stuff. Nothing that has contact in it, which is interesting because they're allowing youth sports to happen on the outside of school, which doesn't make any sense why it's okay in one setting and not the other, but we have to follow what DESE says. And so I think along that lines, I started to think, could we have playground equipment only for that one group, but they don't want you to share anything. So that's, I guess, a no. So
That's why individual
Just a
hula
thought.
hoops, Tammy.
individual hula hoops.
with your name
Get
on the
those
hoop.
up, get the purchase order going, Matt.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
additional pieces to keep in mind. Jason, is that you?
Yeah, well, we can wrap this piece of it up. So we just have to keep an eye on our current situation. We have to watch the data every day and keep a very close watch regionally in what's going on. Again, I mentioned the protocols that will be attached to our plan, and I can certainly send them to you if you need them in advance. And we just have to be flexible. I know we've heard this a bunch of times. We're all learning our way through this, and we've got to keep working together and keep a really flexible mindset. And then lastly, there's a series of next steps. I certainly don't want to read them to you, but I'll just highlight a couple of important ones. We are going to have our survey going out tomorrow. There is a hard stop on that survey for August 5th. We have to have that data together before the next school committee meeting, which will be on August 6th. I will be making my final recommendation to the committee on our reopening plans. We do, in between that, we have a Facebook Live session on August 3rd, which is Monday at 5 p.m. So we can keep this dialogue going, and we would encourage any and all to attend. And please ask the tough questions. We'll do our best to answer. And there are maybe things that we still don't know yet that we're still working out, but we certainly will do our best. And then